everybody, happy Monday. I have a wonderful video for you today. We are going to go into a little bit of depth on the Ubiquiti Unifi mesh system. So that's why I've got this up on the screen here. And let's talk about it, right? Because it's such an interesting idea, and it's something that people have needed for a long time. It's something that I've wanted, something I've been trying to build for a long time. And the technology just hasn't been there until maybe the past year and a half. So over the last 18 months, we've gotten this kind of push towards mesh. Mesh is a simple concept that's extremely difficult to actually implement correctly due to limitations in Wi-Fi, right? It's easy to send signals in duplex over wire. I can talk to you and you can talk to me at the same time. There's no interference. But in wireless, that's not the case. So if I have this as the broadcaster, right? This is my Umpli. And this is the Pro version, which has 3x3 MIMO. And then over on the other side of my link, let's say I've got this, which is a 2x2 MIMO. This is the non-Pro version, the standard. And these need to talk to each other, right? So we have a physical limitation, and that's the fact that this radio, when it's broadcasting, is going to cause interference for this radio if it wants to talk. So these guys have to work out a kind of a back-off protocol. I'm going to broadcast, this guy receives, waits a little bit, says, okay, it's clear. I'm going to broadcast, wait, and this guy finds some time, right? So there's this constant back-off protocol that's being done in Wi-Fi to find the space. And you can do time division multiplexing. You see that in the Unifi, I'm sorry, not the Unifi, the Ubiquiti stuff that isn't Unifi, right? The nano beams. And that's another way. So we actually slice up the time into distinct elements, put our packets in them, and send them off, right? But this doesn't do that. This still is standard 802.11 wireless, meaning it's doing a random back off on its broadcast. And it has to handle two kind of difficult tasks at the same time, and doing one is going to degrade the performance on the other. And that two tasks is, one, we have to provide a wireless bubble, right? So that's this red stuff here. We have to provide client access, regular SSID, just like any access point. That's task one. Task two is we also have to have a radio dedicated as a backhaul link back to our original access point, right? At some point, something actually has to be wired into the network. So we have these point-to-point links between AP1 and AP2, and that is an emulated wire, right? It's not an actual wire, and we still have the physical limitation of this having a hard time talking. Well, this is having its broadcast, right? So they can't really talk over each other. And the same way that you have this thing that happens in phone call, right? And you'll be talking to somebody and they say something and you say, what? What? You hold on. Pause. Okay, I got it. Now I'm talking back, right? So these two things are constantly trying to do their back off, and they're also constantly trying to also provide this wireless bubble. So they can do that on two different radios. They can do it on different frequencies. They can try to eliminate it. But no matter what you're doing, you still have to shut up and listen while the other person's talking. There's no way around that with Wi-Fi. Today, right? There's ways to eliminate it somewhat, in that you can add more radios. So this radio can talk while this radio shuts up and listens. But you can't have a single radio talk and listen at the same time. And that's the fundamental physical problem that we deal with in all Wi-Fi. Is how do you emulate a duplex connection, an Ethernet connection, because it's really TCP/IP, right? And that expects that I can send and receive at the same time on this wire. That's what we've all gotten used to. Nobody does half duplex, simplex links anymore. Everybody needs to be able to talk and listen at the same time. So we have to package up our packets in Wi-Fi in such a way that it emulates that. And so that's your first layer of overhead. So you have three things going on now. We have the packaging of these packets to make them look like Ethernet. We have the clients who are just going to talk normally. They just think this is a regular Wi-Fi network, so they're not going to be in any way aware that there's multiple hops behind it, so we just have to let them behave however they want, right? This is a constant problem in Wi-Fi, is that the clients will do whatever they want, right? You can't really, unless you're in a super enterprise environment, you can't dictate what a client does. You can't really dictate what access point it's going to want to connect to. You can kick it off an access point and say reassociate to this one, but you can't make it. If you have this power, call me. Now, like I said, there's ways to do it in enterprise, but in general, you're just going to have to deal with it. And this is a problem, right? So let's look at their lovely little diagrams. Here's the inside. But these mesh, right? So that there's their topology, and they lie a little bit about it, right? There's no way this is going to work. You cannot have a client here who's going to be talking back to whatever where all these lines go, right? Their topology is just so optimistic. That's how many hops is this? 1, 2, 3, 4 hops, plus all this other stuff. I don't think you're going to get that in the real world. What I've found in my testing, 2 links, right? You can do from a single access point to a pro or another, right, mesh. Range is the major difference between these two. I find this to be about 35% better. Throughput in the real world, not really much difference at the same distance. So if you need the range, get the pro. If you don't need the range, not get the pro, get the standard. But either way, do not, under any circumstances, go more than 2 hops, right? You can, but you're just degrading it so far that I don't see that as a reasonable solution in any situation. I've talked to a lot of different people, and they go overboard. They see this, and they're like, aha, I can just add as many mesh points as I want. Absolutely not true, for all the reasons that we talked about in terms of how the packets themselves need to be diced up. So, here's what I suggest. 2 hops max. If you need to go further, right? If you need to make this hop from this bubble to this bubble, you don't want to do a mesh. And maybe that's what they're saying. Okay, this is not a true mesh backhaul link. This is maybe a nano beam link or something like that. And that makes sense, and that works. But if you think you're going to just cover an area with mesh, you're going to have a bad time. You're just going to get further and further degraded performance for every mesh access point that you put in. You're going to have issues where this mesh over here and this mesh, and then you got a third one, right? Which one is it going to want to uplink to? And you can specify that, but I've heard people are having trouble getting that to stick, and I didn't find it to be the best way anyway, especially if your mesh it needs to be self-healing, right? So this access point could drop off for some reason. That shouldn't be the case. You shouldn't have access points dropping off. Welcome to the real world where they do. So what do you do when that drops off and then it has to self-heal? It doesn't have a specified uplink. The uplink's gone. That whole segment of the network is gone. So you have to kind of leave it in auto if you want the self-healing mesh to work. But if you leave it in auto, it's going to make bad decisions, right? This is the truth of Wi-Fi. So 2 links maximum, or 2 hops on your links maximum, and I probably would keep the client density on these less than 10. If you have 10 people talking to this, I mean, it will. You might get a meg or 2. It depends on what you're doing. But I find that any more than 10 on this is overkill, and about 20 on one of the pros in my testing. And that's real world, right? Because every client that you have, they're just going to wake up randomly and want to talk about something. They're going to want to send a packet to Microsoft to check for updates. They're going to want to, they do these things, right? So even if they're not traffic hogs, even if they're just sitting there and they're just opening up and waiting and sending a few packets every once in a while, every time they do that, that radio has to shut up and listen. And so the more clients you have, even if they're not bandwidth users, this is something that they really should focus on in network engineering, especially in wireless. People miss this. Clients take up bandwidth just sitting there connected and associated. Not a huge amount, but the more that you have, the more problems you're going to have. So, these they always say, oh, this will work for 50 clients, this will work for 100 clients. Yeah, they can all associate, but that's it. They're just going to be associated. Getting any traffic through is going to be almost impossible. So, I'm focusing here on the real world. These things are great, right? I don't want you to get the opinion that I've just trashed them for the last 10 minutes, because they're wonderful, they're fantastic. But they have to be taken in the context of this being an extremely difficult problem to solve. So I kind of wanted to give you some background on the wireless engineering and the RF problems that mesh runs into. So now that you know that, now you know what these do, I hope I've given you a little bit more insight into where mesh is appropriate and where mesh is not appropriate. So check out the links. You want to buy new ones. I'm going to put links to new ones for Amazon on these. I'm going to buy my test gear. I'll put the links to the couple eBay. I have 4 of these and 2 of the standards. And actually I have 2 of the pros still in production. I'm going to pull those out and go with point-to-point links, right? Because that's my ultimate decision. This is great tech, and mesh is awesome, but for my use case, it's just so much easier to just do a point-to-point link and then have another network and another router over there. So that's the way I'm going to go. But I did learn a ton on the mesh systems, really debugging them and configuring them and trying to make this work in a way. And it did work. I don't want you to give the opinion that these are bad. They're excellent. They just have limitations. Main limitation, number one that I want to talk about is the Ethernet ports on this, right? So this has a secondary Ethernet port. You see that main secondary? So you can theoretically use this as a little bridge. So I've got this meshed over here, and I come out of that Ethernet port and I go into a router and I provide another network. That's okay. That works fine. It's not what it's really designed for, and it screws up your topology view. I really wish that they would designate and show that as a link. Maybe I can show you what I mean, right? Let me go into my Unifi real quick. Because this is an interesting problem. It's okay. 1 sec. Get us in here. Let's look at my devices. So you can see I have beta and gamma are disconnected. They're out of production. Alpha and delta are still running. Which one is this one? I wiped them off. I think this is gamma. Doesn't matter. That's our coverage map. But what I really want to show you is our topology, right? So I've got HDAP, SHDAP, and on this one, the SHDAP, which is actually right out this window, and it links to the Mesh Pro Alpha. There's our hop one, Mesh Pro Delta. If I want to show clients, so that's the problem, right? Is that this AFI, that's an amplify, that's providing a network. That's actually connected over here to the Mesh Pro Alpha via wire. The topology does not indicate that. So that's one thing to be aware of, is anything that you wire in, it's because it's going to be like kind of pseudo-bridged, I guess would be the microtik. Or I don't know what the term would be in Unifi, because they don't really even talk about that you can do this, but you can. So you can put the Ethernet out, but it's not going to show correctly. It's not going to show that it's connected to the access point. It's just going to actually appear when the MAC address shows up in the switch. So you're kind of losing a lot of the topology view that I think you should see. That's really my only negative. There's limitations to physics, right, that we discussed, and that's going to be true of any mesh system. So no matter what mesh system, that will be true. And then the other is your network topology gets kind of confusing when you do these pseudo bridges, and you're saying this MAC address is actually a bunch of clients, but not really, because I can't pass along that MAC address in 802.11. So I'd really like to see them find a way to get this topology updated properly. But other than that, man, these things are excellent for what they do. If you just want to, I don't need to run this cable, I just need to get some Wi-Fi over there and provide it for 10, 15, 25 clients, boom. You can just get one of these, you adopt it into your system, the wireless uplink is done, and you just take it and attach it, PoE it. Simple. So in those kinds of use cases, they're excellent. The problem is that those use cases are limited, and those use cases are also already served by point-to-point and then another access point kind of chain, repeaters. There's a lot of ways to do it. Mesh is the best, but it's also the most complicated, and it's also going to get you in the most trouble if you don't know what you're doing. So on that note, I think I've covered both the good and the bad of the mesh, and I hope you really enjoy it. Let's see if this is 10 minutes, because, oh, I'm at 15 minutes? Man, I have dropped so much knowledge on you guys. I really hope that you watch this whole thing. Tell me what you think. Tell me how wrong I am about all this stuff. Subscribe to Seraphimgate, because I'm going to be doing a lot more of these, and I'm going to drop knowledge all day. So thanks again for watching this, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.